I want it to be the case that if you search any of those websites, then the first thing that comes up is what they've done, what the people involved have done, what they make parents do. Every bloody trans kid in all of the UK has now been screwed over by Wes Streeting, who might literally have my mother's voice in his ear. End quote. These are the powerful words of a child who is not only a trans person, but a victim of both parental neglect and abuse, in part thanks to the horrific violence promoted and normalised by the Bayswater support group. A group, I must add, which has received explicit support from the current UK government, including so-called Health Secretary Wes Streeting. Yet they're far from alone, being only one of numerous trans people who have come forward about years of violence enacted upon them by their own parents and guardians, the very people entrusted with protecting them. Violence which, again, is fully enabled by the UK's government and its horrific culture of anti-trans cruelty. But before we delve any deeper, a quick content warning for the following: transmisia, child abuse, torture, medical violence, and sexual violence. If our work has helped you, please consider supporting us via Patreon so that we can keep the channel running. You can also help us by liking, commenting, and sharing our work on social media. Hi there, my name is Ethel Thurston, she, her, they, them, and we need to talk about the Bayswater support group, namely the abuses its members inflict upon trans children, and how a number of those children have come forward to speak out about said violence. We of course covered the Bayswater support group back in February, after video footage re-emerged of Wes Streeting throwing his full support behind the group, with him later going so far as to invite them to take part in the joke of a consultation on puberty blockers for trans youth. Said consultation took place after Sasha Baker and Valeria Roca published 2 groundbreaking articles in the Bureau of Investigative Journalism, bringing light to the facts that they'd infiltrated the Bayswater group and found evidence of extreme abuse and neglect. The example which stuck with me the most was when one parent, and I use that term in the broadest possible sense, denied their child access to a rape crisis centre after they'd been sexually assaulted purely on grounds that said centre was gender affirming. Let me repeat that. The UK Health Secretary went out of his way to include a group that denied a child basic mental health support after they'd been sexually assaulted in a consultation about child well-being, a fact reported on and brought to his attention directly. Then, in April, Sasha and Valeria published another article, this time in the Trans Safety Network, or TSN, delving deeper into certain aspects of said parental abuse, along with Streeting's continued support for it. The big one being the case mentioned in the title, namely how one parent asked whether they should put, quote, extra hot chili sauce, end quote, in their child's mascara so that whenever they did their eyes, it had caused their child excruciating pain. Whilst the TSN are unsure as to whether said parent followed through on such violence, they noted that not a single person in the Discord group challenged this or pointed out the severe pain it would cause the child, not even the admins. That's how normalised this form of violence was. As the article rightfully pointed out, this was nothing short of aversion therapy, i.e., the use of pain, fear, or disgust to forge a psychological connection between said emotion and an act which is perceived to be bad, with the intent of curing the person of said bad behaviour. Yet, not only are said methods flat out pseudoscience, with them never having been shown to work on LGBT+ folk ever, it is outright abuse, specifically torture. And no, subjecting your child to pain does not magically become okay, even if they're lucky and it doesn't leave a mark. Just as purely psychological abuse can be torture, so is this. Repetitive torture is so destructive that it increases the proportion of trans youth who have attempted suicide within the past year from a baseline of 8% to a whopping 57%. There is no world in which said violence is acceptable at all in any form. And yet, in spite of both the Bureau of Investigative Journalism and the Trans Safety Network reaching out to Streeting and the Department for Health and Social Care, they refuse to take action. In fact, as I've mentioned repeatedly, and I will keep mentioning it until it's driven home, the UK government went out of its way to invite the Bayswater group to partake in a public consultation on trans child well-being after the initial reports were published. Wes Streeting and the DHSC fully condone this child abuse, and, in my mind, should face legal consequences in line with that, or, in the case that the legal system fails us, as it so often has recently, needs to be held to account by the public. Speaking of which, breaking update just as I was wrapping up this script. A group calling themselves Trans Bash Back smashed up Wes Streeting's constituency office in Ilford North whilst also painting Child Killer on the windows. The group has since come forward and issued a statement on their reasons behind the actions, citing the attacks on trans youth healthcare among other legal violence by Streeting and the Labour Party. I hope this is the start of a long line of actions by adults to hold said pompous genocidaire responsible for the deaths he is causing, and I'm considering doing a follow-up video exploring these statements in greater detail, if you'd like that. So do drop me a comment down below if you'd like to hear more on that. Yeah, something missing from all the articles covering the Bayswater group thus far are the voices of the children themselves. This has been a major problem with regards to the UK government's ongoing genocide targeting trans youth, seen in how Streeting has outright refused to meet with the very trans children he stripped of essential life-saving healthcare, children such as those at Trans Kids Deserve Better. And we have an entire playlist dedicated to said group and their various protests over the last year, so do check that out. But this brings us rather nicely to today's article, once again by the ever-vigilant Sasha Baker and Valeria Roca, titled, "My Parents Very Clearly Do Not Love Me, Children of Bayswater Speak Out," which was published on the TSN website. The article starts off much like this video, going over the previous articles whilst highlighting Streeting and the DHSC's absolute refusal to protect trans children. It then goes on to present excerpts from interviews given by 4 of the group's victims, Charlotte, Maria, Liam and Noah, not their real names, 2 of whom are minors, whilst the other 2 are young adults. Now, there's a lot in this article, so much that I won't be able to cover everything, so do give it a read once you're done here. As always, all references can be found in the video transcript. I'll also include links to Sasha and Valeria's articles in the quick references for ease of access. Starting with Liam, who is currently a sixth form student, making him 16 to 18 years old. He was initially allowed to go to therapy when his parents believed it had sort him out, that is to say, detransition him, only to pull him from it the moment they realised he was receiving actual medical support. As the article reads, quote, Liam began seeing a therapist through NHS Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services, CAMHS. He thinks that his parents only allowed him to access the service because they thought it would be conversion therapy, but in reality, his therapist was supportive. Some Bayswater parents with experience of CAMHS advise other group members to avoid them like the plague. Many discuss avoiding CAMHS entirely, seeking out private conversion therapists, or denying their children any form of mental health support. When Liam's parents realized the CMHS practitioner accepted his gender, they pulled him out of therapy. His mother also became increasingly paranoid that Liam's school was allowing him to transition behind her back, a common fear articulated on Bayswater's forum, and prevented him from leaving the house alone. Eventually, Liam's school and his GP made safeguarding referrals, but the safeguarding hub declined to open an investigation, concluding that rejecting Liam's gender was a matter of parental choice. Liam was also referred to a therapeutic art class, which his parents did not allow him to attend. "It kept getting worse," he said. "I feel if your average teenage boy was being forced to attend bra fittings as a punishment, that would be immediately identified as sexual abuse, and it would mean instant removal. But it was just parental choice for me." End quote. Liam is 100% correct. What his parents have done to him is sexual abuse, specifically of a minor. Sadly, this sort of thing is highly normalized when it's targeted at trans kids. We've actually started to look into a different case involving doctors at a repetitive torture clinic pressuring minors to have sex in order to prove that they're transgender. Indeed, the gender-critical ideology that motivates much of the anti-trans rhetoric, particularly in the UK and wider Europe, is fundamentally built upon narratives which sexualize children, declaring them breeding stock or a sexual resource that needs defending from a secret order of Jewish billionaires. This is mostly targeted at trans men and AFAB MB folk, painting them as confused, often autistic, cis white girls, but harms all trans people in blocking said essential care across the board. So this behaviour is not unusual for gender-critical fascists, which becomes a huge problem when said fascists are adults in positions of power over children, whether they be legal guardians, teachers, or doctors. No child is safe around gender-critical fascists, not a single one. Anyone who defends, or worse, pushes for gender-critical fascists to be given access to or control over children needs to be investigated for child rape trafficking. That includes the UK government, particularly our current Health Secretary, Wes Streeting. The real rape gang problem in the UK isn't migrants, it's gender-critical fascism, with said predators having clear political power designed to strip trans youth of their autonomy and make them easier targets to groom and abuse. That is what Streeting has chosen to make himself an accessory to systematic child sexual abuse. There's also the neglect behind the abuse. That is to say, how Liam is being denied basic mental health support. This feeds into what we discussed in the first video, the way a child victim of sexual violence was denied access to a rape crisis centre. That's the level of cruelty embodied by gender-critical adults. That's how much they're willing to force their child to suffer just to prevent any possibility that their child might feel comfortable and accepted in who they are. This is violently enforced isolation, solitary confinement, horrific psychological torture being weaponized on children. Because there is no evil too horrific for a gender-critical adult to inflict upon a child. Sadly, there's very few safeguards in place, as seen in the literal safeguarding body, refusing to even investigate after both Liam's school and GP made a safeguarding referral. This is a common theme, with the article going on to add that quote, Liam believes his parents are following the playbook of Desist, Detrans and Detox, a conversion therapy manual promoted on Bayswater's website. The book contains a section about how to recruit relatives into conversion efforts. He has witnessed his mum talking to relatives about his transition. I told another family member about my parents' attempts at conversion practices, and I wasn't believed, Liam said. End quote. First, there's the manual. The fact that this is even a thing that exists and is routinely promoted in the Bayswater group shows just how organized this violence is. Sure, There might not be a building somewhere with trans children being dragged into the basement like US conversion camps. But this is being orchestrated. The government knows this, and they're not just allowing it, they're promoting those responsible. Then there's the lack of adult care, how cis people, particularly in the UK, are so willfully ignorant of just how bad things are being made by gender-critical fascists that they won't even check when a child tells them they're being abused. I've even seen this general mentality with my own family, particularly my dad. I remember bringing up the horrific shit Rowling had done at the time when someone brought her up, quoting specific examples only for him to assert with full conviction that, no she didn't. I was just left standing there, stunned, asking myself, excuse me, do you fucking keep tabs on her for work? Is this sort of blissful ignorance cis people have a real privilege they like to use to preserve their comfort, this sense that all is right with the world, when it very much isn't? Yet my experience, as shitty as it was, pales in comparison to that of a victim of gender-critical parental abuse who reached out only to be ignored, as with Liam. I can't even begin to imagine just how much courage it took for Liam to reach out to family for support about the need for other adults in his life to protect him from his parents, only to be dismissed, to be gaslit. One thing you learn as a child victim of abuse is just how little of a shit the vast majority of adults actually give about the safety of children. We see this in everything from child sexual abuse to torture, like we're discussing today. Sure, adults fucking love to say that they support any child in need. Many will even fantasize about all the things they do to a child predator or abuser should they ever encounter one. But when they're actually needed, when a child is calling for their help, they're nowhere to be seen. It is absolutely soul-crushing and makes victims feel so isolated, like they're drowning, completely unseen by all those around them. Yet sadly, that's not the worst thing that can happen, with some gender-critical parents poisoning the family against them, including their own siblings, as explained by Noah, who is also 16 to 18 years old at the time of this article, with it stating, quote, Noah has also observed his mother co-opting other family members into her rejection of her trans son. In spite of coming out several years ago, he has never had a forthright conversation with his younger siblings about his own gender. Instead, Noah says his mother instilled fear about transition in his younger siblings. They were left believing, as soon as I went off to uni, I was going to pump myself full of horrible drugs, that was going to give me heart disease, and I was going to die of a heart attack, he said. Noah thinks his mother believes in a link between gender and the possibility of death. If Noah manages to get hold of hormones, his mother has stated plans to destroy them, he says. He also expressed concern that she plans to force him to see a conversion therapist over the summer in a last-ditch attempt to prevent him from transitioning. End quote. Again, absolutely horrific. To be a minor who is very openly demonized by your own mother to your siblings is traumatic. Just the sheer level of hatred on display here, again, targeting a child. Yet it doesn't stop at demonization, as Noah explained, with the article reading, quote, Noah has seen how his mother's transphobia has morphed into broader reactionary politics. I think she's very worried that I'm going to get off to uni, get involved in an illegal protest, and then go to jail for a bunch of years, he said. While this may appear unrelated to him being trans, Noah says in his mother's mind, the two are intimately connected. She said that she didn't actually want me to get the grades that I wanted because it would mean going off to uni, and that she kinda hoped that I would fail so she'd have more time to desist me. Noah believes her fears has led his mother to attempt to sabotage his A-levels, embroiling him in regular hours-long arguments that distract him from his studies." End quote. So it's very much a possibility, and I have absolutely no reason to doubt Noah, that his mum is actively trying to sabotage his future in a last-ditch attempt to control him and his body. Again, these are the actions of the people Wes Streeting and the wider Labour government have thrown their full support behind. This is the violence they are complicit in. Other gender-critical parents, meanwhile, outright cut their children off from family members. See Charlotte, who was 22 when they came out, with the article explaining that, quote, "Charlotte's mother has been more successful in creating barriers between them and their extended family, weaponizing the idea that trans people are dangerous to children to prevent them seeing their niece. My mum told me that as long as I present as Charlotte, I'm not allowed to see her, because it's not fair on the child to be caught up in this situation," they said. "I don't feel comfortable talking to that side of the family because I know how much my mum talks and what my mum says." End quote. Once again, not only presenting Charlotte as a threat to themselves, like with Noah, but to the children in their life, casting a young adult, their own child, as something to be afraid of simply because they've learned who they are. Is it any surprise then that Charlotte openly stated that, quote, "My parents very clearly do not love me," end quote, when this is the violence they choose to engage in, spurred on in large part by the Bayswater group, who is in turn enabled by the UK government. That's why Noah gave us the quote at the start, telling us that he needs these cases of abuse and neglect to be the thing that comes up anytime someone searches the name of the group. Unsurprisingly, a number of these people have cut off contact with their families, with others planning to do so. The sad thing is, far from forcing said parents to reflect on their horrific actions, this will likely be taken and presented as further proof of just how terrible and far-reaching the trans agenda really is. That is, in my experience of having covered this topic for more than a decade now, the most likely outcome. Though it's not the only possible outcome, and I do genuinely hope, for the sake of all those interviewed by Sasha and Valeria, that these so-called parents wake the fuck up. Because it can happen. We've seen it happen before. Dr. Caroline Littman, the mother whose trans daughter's suicide as a result of a lack of NHS care was excluded from the government farce, which was the Appleby report, was herself a gender-critical parent at one point, but she learned to prioritize the safety and health of her child. Sadly, it wasn't enough to save Caroline. But who knows? With the Supreme Court ruling backfiring the way it has and the recent actions of Bashback, maybe we're on the verge of turning things around and fixing the wounds inflicted upon the trans community by gender-critical fascists. The minds they've poisoned and the families they've destroyed. I certainly like to think so, and I'd invite you all to join me in that hope as we continue to push forward. Though, what do you think? What are your thoughts on the article? How long do you think it will take before the violence enabled by Wes Streeting and the wider Labour Party is recognised for what it is? Do you want a video on Bashback, and is there anything specific you'd like us to touch on? Did you notice something I missed? If so, be sure to let me know in the comments down below. And if you appreciate what we do here and want to help keep us running, please consider becoming one of multiple patrons who make our work possible. You can also make a one-time donation via PayPal or Super Thanks on YouTube. On that note, we'd just like to thank the following people: Matthew Kovac, Flynn, Bo Ayer, Deborah Goldsmith, Higgins the Seagull, Jackie Sins, Mix Alba, and Peter Cole. And for myself, Adita and Levi, take care now.